underdog computer and network support. We help businesses who are frustrated with technology become more stable, productive, and profitable. We do that by helping our clients make technology choices that suit their business needs. One of my goals as a business is to be our client's IT department, their managed CIO. Many businesses have different needs, based on industry requirements, their software solutions, employees. So what we do is we help them discover what that is, and then we build a technology solution around that. So the purpose of today's seminar is to basically make you guys understand what is a business cyber hygiene and why it's important. There's a lot of components to cyber hygiene, but I'll just touch on a couple of key components that I think are important. Does everybody, so patch management. I'm sure everybody knows what patching is. Basically patching, I put into 3 different categories. And it's for any type of computer, whether it's an Apple, whether it's Microsoft product, Android. There's 3 different categories I consider. There's the plugging hole category, which is your regular updates. So basically, your software vendor will discover that there's a problem. Maybe it's causing a memory leak, maybe it's causing a blue screen, whatever. What they will do is they will discover those problems, and they will fix them, and then they will release them on a regular patching schedule. Then there's what I call security updates, which basically it's whether it's a team inside the manufacturers or an external team. They look at the programs, and they discover that hey, if left untouched, this is vulnerable to hacking. Basically, a hacker could exploit that vulnerability, whatever it is, get into your machine and compromise it. So those security updates will be fixed. If it's not such a big deal, they'll bundle all the security fixes together and release it in a quarterly update. If it's really severe, they'll release it as a one-off. And then there are updates that I call upgrades or roll-ups, which are basically adding new feature or removing old feature from software. Such as, let's say, Microsoft wants to release a new browser to take care of something that's new on the internet. They'll release that as part of an upgrade. I know what everybody's saying. Great, my computer has been updating all by itself since before Windows 7, or Macintoshes seem to update by themselves, and that's not entirely true. Depending on how the computer was was configured, and what software is actually on the computer, it may not have everything. Like for instance, believe it or not, for Windows, you're probably just getting the regular plugging hole updates. The security updates, upgrades, drivers, they're all optional. And definitely there's no third-party updates that come through as by default. So drivers, for instance. Drivers are a special piece of software that basically tell the operating system how to talk to the peripheral, like a printer, a monitor, a keyboard, a mouse. Those drivers, just like your operating system, will have the same type of problems. They'll have security flaws, they'll have new features, old features need to be removed, and all that stuff. So it's very important for drivers to be updated as well. Firmware is like an operating system, but it's very specific for the device. Like printers have firmware, your firewalls, your switches, your wireless devices, they all have firmware. It basically just tells them how to operate. And again, like your operating system on your computer, they need to be updated from time to time because of security problems, plugging holes or upgrades, removing features and all that stuff. Using commercial grade equipment. So generally speaking, commercial grade equipment is equipment generally not found in the big box stores like your Walmart, your Staples, your Office Depots. They're a little bit more difficult to set up because there's so many features involved that they just, the end user really, it's kind of counterintuitive. The end user really can't set it up, so it usually does take a professional. But they're built better, they're capable of handling more, they have better support, They're more secure because they have more granular features and they usually do cost more. In relationship to residential grade equipment, which is built cheaply to attract the masses so that the average Joe can go into the interface and configure it and all that stuff. The interface is really restrictive, so those advanced features, they're hidden. A lot of things are just kind of left open so that it's just easier to plug and play. Your house, and they're made for households. So your regular household may have like 4 or 5 computers or something like that. A business may have 10, 15 computers. It really can't handle the load. The support is usually overseas by chat or by email, or they may not even have support at all. And then since they're built cheaply, they don't last as long because they're a lot of businesses will use these devices in their business, and they're working harder than they should be, so they don't last as long. Next-gen firewalls, they are what they sometimes are called UTM devices, which stand for Unified Threat Management. They basically put a big pocket of protection between your internal network and the internet. And one of the best advantages of of next-gen firewalls, they use machine language learning to identify identify threats and block them. So unified threat management includes things like application control, content filtering. They have packet inspections, and some of the more advanced ones have things like sandboxing and antivirus or anti-malware protection. So, that gives you another layer of protection. So as something comes in, it's smart enough to know that, hey, this may be malicious, so it may throw it into a sandbox and then test it up there. And then if it says it's good, it brings it back down again. And this happens in seconds. Like you wouldn't even be aware that this is happening.
Okay, Carmine, what's a sandbox?
So what a sandbox is, basically it's an offloaded safe zone, I guess, best way to say it, where it just takes, malicious code, puts it up there, it's away from everything else, it does all its, computer programming and all that stuff to determine whether it is actually safe, and then once it is, it then brings it back down again. That's kind of an overview of what sandboxing is. Your older firewalls, your residential firewalls, they use more rigid access control lists, so they're not as fluid as next-gen firewalls are. Next-gen anti-malware. I know I did say anti-malware, not antivirus. The definition of malware is malicious software. So viruses are a form of malware. Again, next-gen anti-malware, like the next-gen antivirals, use machine language learning. They're faster at detecting malware. They use a cloud community to help them determine and eliminate viruses. So what that means is, let's say a virus outbreaks in Europe. By the time it reaches America, which could be the next day or the next hour, your computer, because it's using the next-gen anti-malware, will already know and probably have a fix to the virus. It uses most older antiviruses like your Nortons, your Trend Micros, your Semantics. They all use signature-based detection. And again, signature-based is more rigid because it uses human beings to actually compile the code and then send it to your antivirus. So because of that, there's a lot of room for error. So what's the point of this? Why does it matter? I've been doing IT for almost 30 years now, and it's alarming though. Over the last 2 or 3 years, I've been going to a lot of businesses, and they don't seem to be concerned with everything I just mentioned here. They just think that what they have is good enough, and you may be in this room right now, but that couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, think about the customer information you may have. Whether you have EIN numbers, social security numbers, you may have, just very sensitive data about your customers. Think about your employees. You probably even have more information about your employees, you know, spouse information, where they live, you know, all that stuff. Hackers can use that information to further, you know, do social engineering. Like maybe they'll get a mortgage in your name, or maybe they'll take over your mortgage, or, you know, maybe they'll open up credit cards in your name. Like, these are all things that are just, you know, out there. And then think about your partner relationships. Think about who you have coming into your network as well as whose network you're using. For instance, I'll give you a story. I don't know if anybody remembers this. I believe it was Target. Target stores went down, their entire network went down. The reason, does anybody know why they went down? The reason why it went down is because their HVAC vendor had malware on his laptop, and when he plugged into the network to you know, check the air conditioning or whatever HVAC people do, he basically uploaded his malware to their network and took them down. So
Wow.
that's what I mean by having partners, you know, understanding where your partners are and who you access.
That's crazy.
So how can you be used by a cyber criminal? Well, what is the number one goal of a cyber criminal, or of a criminal? Not to get caught, right? So cyber criminals will look for vulnerable machines. They're not going to attack the FBI or the CIA or, you know, Bank of America or the city of Florida from their own computers, their own networks. They're going to look for a computer that has vulnerabilities that they can be attached to so that they can launch the attack from that computer. Basically, you become an unwilling and an unknowing you know, a participant of a crime. They can hide in systems for days, for weeks, for years. I went to a cyber seminar a couple of months ago, and a guy was the leader of a red team. I don't know if anybody knows what a red team is. Basically, so he's an ethical hacker, and basically what an ethical hacker will do is he will get hired by a company to basically break into their system, like he gets paid to do that, so that they can understand what their vulnerabilities are, so that they can learn how to fix those vulnerabilities so they don't really get attacked. So what a red team does is they take it a step further. They actually not only break into your system, but they stay there until you actually find them. So this one, what he was basically saying was, this one company that he broke into, they were there for like 6 months. He would, every week, he would produce to the CEO oodles of confidential information, and their IT team was, you know, spinning their wheels trying to figure out what was going on. The CEO getting frustrated. Anybody want to take a guess as to how they were getting this confidential information? How they were getting it was on day one, once they got through the system and broke in, they did a scan of the entire network. They found a printer, a copier that had outdated firmware and the default password. They broke into that machine. They set up a CCing email, so everything that was being copied would be then emailed to an email address. They then presented every week to the CEO this information. So really, the only way to be protected is to you know, have good equipment, good anti-malware, and to be consistently monitoring your computers and your networks. So in closing, I want to thank everyone for coming out. I hope this was informative, and if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask.